Hey, what's up, guys? Today we're going to be using a bunch of interesting AI tools to generate the various parts of a track, and then we're going to compile those parts and either make a banger or, more likely than not, a complete piece of garbage. So stay tuned. We'll be letting our AI overlords guide us today. And before we start, make sure you grab our EDM starter kit below. We're giving it away for free as part of this tutorial, and there's over 700 samples in there, so you guys can start cooking up some heat. So first up, guys, we've got Suno AI here. And this website is pretty insane. If you haven't checked it out, you should definitely play around with it. Basically, you just tell it to generate any type of song you want. You want to make a hardstyle song about your couch. You want to make a psytrance song about your friends. Anything, right? Right here, it's recommending that I make a bouncy reggaeton song about finding love on a rainy day. So that's one direction we could go. I'm thinking more so a high energy house track with elements of techno and lyrics about a galactic traveler. The key is A minor. And so we'll spit it out. It'll take, 30 seconds or so to generate. But this is pretty crazy. The lyrics in particular are sometimes really good. And there's also this custom mode, if you wanted to enter your own lyrics or kind of dial in a more specific style. There's some premium features as well. I'm just using the free version. But this website is equally interesting and terrifying, right? I can't even imagine how many songs on Spotify have already been generated just using a click here. How many probably Spotify artists are just entirely using AI songs, right? They're definitely out there. And how do you police it, right? There's really no way to know. So this is going to be an issue in the coming years here. But here we go. We've got Galactic High. So let's see how it did. So not bad, right? I'm not sure I love this track, but we're not going to use this for today's track. That would be a terrible video. We're just going to extract some of the elements from it, maybe use the vocal or the drums, and probably just use it as an arrangement guide for our song. And so I'm going to give this a download, and we can basically just, grab the MP3. There's also a video option where you can generate some videos. You see the cover art we've got here for Galactic High. And so what I'm going to do now is go over to Moises AI. And basically, this is similar to another website you may have heard of, Lal AI. Basically, these are stem extraction platforms. So let's say you're doing a remix, let's say you want a remix, I Remember by Cascade and Deadmau5. You can upload the original track, say I want to separate the acapella from the other instrumental, and it will spit it out for you. For now, we're going to head over to 11labs.io. And I've been pretty impressed with this website. There's a lot of these, sound effect generators. Basically, type in the type of sound effect you want, and it spits it out. So we could say an epic intro ambience similar to the movie Interstellar. All right, kind of jarring. I kind of like the third one, but I'm just going to download them all. And now we'll go a bass sound similar to those in the music of EDMProd. Just use one of your favorite artists as a guide. All right, we've got a couple clean subs in there we could use for some low end, so I'm going to grab those as well. Now let's go a percussive top loop similar to those found in a Chris Lake track. All right, I'm just going to download these as well. Now let's go an absolutely wild snare build. An absolutely wild, high energy snare build. All right, I'm just going to download these as well. Now we're on to Yarn.io, guys. And basically, you just type in a phrase, and then it's going to show you all the movies and TV shows where that phrase has been uttered. So we could say, wow, this is cool, and see what pops up. Okay, so we got some Family Guy.
Wow, this is cool.
Okay, so that could be a candidate. Let's see what else we got. A little bit of South Park over here, Modern Family, Master of None. Let's see what South Park has.
Wow, this is so cool.
Okay, there's some music behind it, so it might not really fit in the track. Gonna look for kind of a more clean vocal. All right, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Crime, Top Chef, Parks and Rec. All right, let's go Parks and Rec.
Wow, this is really, really cool.
Okay, we're using that one. So you can just download it and we'll drag it in later. Another one we may circle back to, guys, as we need more sounds is UberDuck. Here's their AI apps. A lot of people use UberDuck for the text-to-speech function. I think it would be nice to try the sound generation tool and compare the quality to 11 Labs. Also, at some point, maybe the rap vocal acapella generator, possibly get, some vocals in there for a wonky intro or outro or maybe a B section. Who knows? But UberDuck is pretty solid as well. Another thing we'll be doing if I pop over into Ableton is using some of the MIDI generation tools in Live 12. This probably doesn't qualify as AI technically, but it's still pretty interesting. These transform and generate tools, if you create a MIDI clip, you can use something like the seed function, choose a scale up top. So if we are in A minor, we can just press this handy dandy little scale mode button. And as long as it's purple, it's going to lock everything to A minor. So all the purple bars here, the purple lanes. And then we could say, let's make a melody that goes from, A2 on the piano roll up to A4. And then press generate, and we get a crazy melody. We could have less density if we want, press generate. So just to quickly sync up, guys, before we dive into Ableton for what should be a fun little production session, what do you guys think of all this, Let us know in the comments. Is this good? Is this bad? We're using AI tools to make some sounds, make some stems. Is it really that different from going to Splice and getting a loop? My take on it is as long as you're coming from a good place and you're being a little creative with it, why not use these tools to get the job done faster, right? So anyways, get the discussion going in the comments. It's kind of a gray area right now. I am going to brew myself a coffee and get all of our stems kind of arranged in a nice clean way so that we can start making a track. All right, guys, so I've loaded up all of our sounds into Ableton here in a nice color-coded format for us. I've also converted some stuff to our BPM of 127, which is the BPM that Suno AI generated that original Galactic High track. This is what it was sounding like. I also have some of the stems here, for example, the drums that we extracted from Moises AI. Sounds like this. It sounds okay, definitely needs some work. And then here's the vocals that we extracted as well. So it sounds all right. You can at least hear most of the lyrics. There's some pieces of the melody coming through and some moments where it kind of dips out a little bit. But that's my experience with these stem extractors. They're usually okay, but not perfect. And then we've got all the other sounds too. So the Chris Lake top loops we made, the absolutely wild snare builds that weren't wild at all, the EPROM basses, etc. And just stepping back for a second and thinking about workflow as a producer, this can be a really good way to work, sort of get all your sounds ready to go, the palette of colors that you're going to paint with. And then when you go to write the track, make sure you have a good chunk of time carved out and your brain isn't going to be getting pulled in a bunch of different directions. What sounds am I going to use? What comes next? If you've ever found yourself, in the middle of writing a track and then you're looking for samples and you get sidetracked, this is a good way to sidestep that. So definitely experiment with this workflow. And let's start with drums. So I'm going to add a bunch of space to the left. I'm going to select this 33 bar region and then just press Control I on my keyboard, press it again and again to add more space where we can start writing the track. these are our drums that we extracted from Moises AI. So I'm just going to paste them over and we'll get a little loop going for kind of our main drop drums, right? So this is going to be pretty much the loudest thing in the track. So we can kind of work around this after we dial it in. I like to use Ableton's drum bus when sort of fattening drums or resampling them a little bit. In this case, we're going to get a little bit volume boost now. We can use the transient knob to make them a little bit tighter. It kind of cleans it up a little bit versus over here. I'm also going to do something known as mixing into the red. So right now we might be peaking, but not by much, right? So I'm going to boost our limiter a little bit more and kind of find the sweet spot. Around 6 or so is good. If I boost it too much, it's just going to sound boomy and bad. So right about there can serve as kind of the floor of our track. And now let's get a couple other top loops in here. We had these, Chris Lake top loops that I don't know how much they resemble Chris Lake, but a couple of them were pretty catchy. It kind of sounds good with all of them playing at once. So I'm just going to paste them all over and let's see if we can get a little loop going here. We'll bring in one by one and see what catches our ear, which parts we want to use of each. So the second one I like, I'm just going to remove some of the mid frequencies. And number one is sounding okay for sort of a little clap sound. All right, number three is sounding kind of bad right now. I think it needs, again, a little bit of EQ. Now we'll bring in number 4. So we can use this one for kind of the body of the top loop, right? Kind of this 100 to 1K region. Sounded pretty good. I'm going to add a little bit of reverb. I like to use Valhalla Room for drums. Just 10-15% reverb, a quick decay. Now for the sub bass, guys, I already know exactly what we're going to do. And that's use one of these cool little EPROM basses here. So this last one has a nice sustained, clean feel to it. So I'm going to copy this section over and I'm going to zoom in on this first part here. If I select this and press Z on my keyboard, I can now zoom in, press X to zoom back out, back in, back out. So handy dandy little trick there. And I'm just going to make sure, sub is starting right off the rip. And I'm just going to make a little pumping effect with LFO tool. So it's going to be in time with our beat now. So over the course of a quarter bar here, it's going to be just side chains to the kick, right? And we can also make sure that we have this smooth knob boosted so we don't have any weird clicks. So we also need to tune it. So make sure that we're in the key of A. So we're down in E right now, so we need to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 semitones on our warp mode here. I'm going to go for complex, up 5 semitones. So now we have a nice clean sub in the key of A. Looks like it's going slightly above A at times, so I'm going to micro tune it down just a touch so that it's right around the root note there. Sounded pretty good. So now let's spend some time dialing in the vocal hook of the track. And I've just realized that AI has failed us, ladies and gentlemen. Our track, which we requested to be generated in the key of A minor, is not in A minor. It's actually in E flat major. So what do we do about this? Well, I've got the Camelot wheel here. And if you're not familiar with the Camelot wheel, basically it shows you relative keys. So right here, E flat major corresponds to the key of C minor. Basically, all of the notes on the keyboard in C minor are also the same notes that are in E flat major. So if we want to go from C minor to A minor, which I do, I want all white notes on the keyboard, baby. Easier, right? We can just go down 1, 2, 3 semitones. So this is actually going to work out really well because our vocal, it's got this kind of fun, colorful vibe, but it's a little bit cheesy. So if we pitch it down, add some effects, maybe make it a little more robotic, I think we can go for a more interesting track. So I'm going to grab the chorus section. We've mainly been listening to the 2 verses at the start. And I'm just going to pitch it down using complex mode, which I like for vocals a lot of the time, 3 semitones. And I'm going to loop, get a little 8-bar loop going with our kick, sub, and no perks. So this is what we got.
Oh, my heart beats with the stroke, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam. Meteor showers not too great, stardust floating in my wake. Every leap another shape, rhythms that the world's all made.
So I'm already liking the vibe a lot better. The vocal versus a few semitones
Oh,
up.
my heart beats with the stroke, journeying through every globe.
Right? It feels like 2 different tracks going in 2 different directions. The first one, again, kind of this fun, colorful vibe. Maybe if you were making like a color-based track or something. And this one feels like we're going for now something that is leaning a little bit more towards the darker side, which is good. So now let's just add some effects and some processing to this vocal and sort of figure out which pieces are good, which pieces are bad, because there's still some spots where it kind of dips out. So we're going to have to work around that. You know, if there's a spot where your vocal glitches out, maybe we can just add an FX glitch in our track there. So we'll kind of let this little 8-bar piece guide us.
Oh, my heart beats with the stroke, journeying through every globe.
One thing I like to do with vocals is just start adding delayed layers. So if you use Ableton's delay here, and we just make a parallel train. So I'm going to click it, press Control G, and then this handy dandy little Ableton button here opens up this menu. So if I just duplicate our delay, we're now going to have one channel with no delay. This is going to be our dry chain. And then we're going to have this one be 100% wet, and it's going to be slightly offset from the original signal. So it's going to play 19 milliseconds after the original signal. And we're just going to mix this into taste with our dry signal.
Oh, my heart beats with the stroke. Oh, my heart beats with the stroke, journeying.
I'm going to add some feedback so you can hear the effect.
Oh, my heart beats with the stroke, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home.
So with it
Oh,
off,
my heart beats with the stroke.
with it
Oh,
on.
my heart beats with the stroke, journeying through every globe.
So I'm just going to pull back on the feedback now and the amount. So it's just a subtle
Oh, my
layer.
heart beats with the stroke, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam.
I'm also going to add some EQ, get rid of some of those low frequencies that we don't really
Oh, my
need.
heart beats with the stroke, journeying through every globe.
Sometimes you need 2 EQs to cut out low end entirely in Ableton. If I look on a meter with one
Oh, my heart
EQ,
beats with the stroke, journeying through every globe.
it did a pretty good job that time. Sometimes you will need a second one to fully get rid of, the sub frequencies. But let's see what we got
Oh,
now.
my heart beats with the stroke, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam. Meteor showers not too.
So right there's a weird glitch sound that we'll have to work
I
around,
roam. Meteor showers.
right? So let's just mute that right now, and we'll just mark glitch. We'll add kind of, an effects little glitch later or something like that. And let's see what we got. I'm going to solo the second part of the vocal.
Meteor showers not too great. Stardust floating in my wake. Every leap another shape. Rhythms that the world's all made.
All right, so it's not perfect, but we're going to run with it. For the chords, guys, I've been wanting to ask ChatGPT, what's the catchiest chord progression? How can we make a heater? So I'm going to say, what's the catchiest chord progression for a spacey and housey techno track in 2025? The key is A minor. And we'll see what we get. Hypnotic, emotional, driving. Yes, that's exactly what we want. Okay. A minor, F major 7, C major 7, E7. Okay. Maybe. Not sure if I want lush and dreamy and jazzy. Anything else? Anything better? Stop giving me dreamy. Dark and driving. I think that's what we want. Okay, we're going dark and driving. A minor, G major, F major, E. So let's get this pattern here. A minor. So root note here, up 3 semitones from there. 1, 2, 3, and then 4 from there is going to be your minor chord. And then we're going to have G major. So only difference is this note here is going to be up a semitone. Then we had F and E. F and E. Let's bring these down. Right? So it's descending, and this is what we got. Okay, I think this could work. So possible chords. And let's also ask ChatGPT, which instrument should I use for my chords? And we'll run with it. Synth pads, yes, I do like analog synth pads, but we're going digital today. Okay, we could do some FM synthesis. Any presets? Any preset recommendations in synths? And by the way, guys, this tool is really nice for certain workflows as a producer. I was making some cover art the other day and I was in Photoshop. I didn't really know what to do next and use how to use certain tools. And so I just asked GPT and it kind of guided me through all the steps. Okay, so it's still giving us the same thing. I guess it wants us to use a pad. All right, so we'll get a pad in here. I'm gonna use Anna, which is a pretty nice synth for pads. Pretty lush sounding, probably will fit the vibe of the track. And yeah, we'll maybe just use this as kind of a background element, or maybe we'll get some kind of chord stabs with a little call and response going with the vocal. So nothing's loading up in Anna right now, so I guess AI wants us to use Omnisphere. So we'll use Omnisphere. So pads and strings, we're just gonna go with God's cloud of strings. AI led me there. And I'm just gonna listen with the vocal and the kick for a second.
My heart beats with the stroke, journeying through every globe, lost in space feels.
We gotta go up an octave.
My heart beats with the stroke, journeying through every globe, lost in space feels like my home. In this true I verse I wrote. My heart beats with the stroke, journeying through every globe, lost in space feels like my home. In this true I verse I wrote.
All right, I think that's the ticket right there. One other thing I want to do before we go to another element is see how the sub sounds with this progression here. So A, G, F, E. So we've got our root note sub, and I'm just going to label this A. And I'm going to duplicate it 3 times. This one is now going to be G. Or let me see one more time, actually. What was A, G, F, E, right? So G. This is going to be F. This one is E. And so I'm just going to pitch it down, right? This one's going to be down 2 semitones for E. This one's going to be down 4. And this one's going to be down 5. So we're going to see how this sounds with the chords, right? We'll get this nice and labeled. We've got A, G, F, E. And so we need to have it actually more so in this fashion right here. Mute the ends. And let's see how this sort of falling effect sounds right here.
My heart beats with the stroke, journeying through every globe, lost in space feels like my home. In this true I verse I roam.
That is nice. That is nice. AI is treating us well today. Zooming out now, guys, and thinking a bit high level, what do we have here? Where could we go next with this song? We've got a really short loop of some very core ideas, which is great. And we could keep adding to it, kind of fully maximize everything, the super loop approach, right? But the only issue with that method is that it's very easy to get caught in the loop because you're just working on one small piece of the track. So my idea now is let's go work on the breakdown, because these chords, these pads we just wrote, are sort of screaming emotional breakdown, sort of the lowest energy point in the track where it's just the pads and maybe a couple other subtle elements, then maybe the vocal creeps in. But we'll go work on that piece, and then other ideas will start waterfalling, and kind of the story of our track will start to reveal itself. So I'm going to add a bunch of space over here, and I'm just going to call this piece here breakdown. And just thinking about, how this might play out. First phrase might just be kind of a transition. We just had a drop section, and now we're going into kind of a low energy part of the breakdown. So then here we say pads. Maybe over here we'll have the vocal and sub come in. And then maybe here we can transition to a riser section and then go to a drop. Obviously, this doesn't have to be set in stone, but kind of a typical breakdown to drop, falling, and then rising energy type progression. So I'm going to get the pads over here and the vocal as well. And I'm just going to loop them over here.
Oh, my heart beats with the stroke, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam.
So the pads are really loud right now, and the vocal is a clear, tier 1 element, lead vocal in front. The pads we want to be kind of a tier 2 element, so a little bit quieter, a little bit tucked behind.
Oh, my heart beats with the stroke, journeying through every globe. Lost in space.
I'm also going to filter them down a bit so that we'll have some space to kind of ramp the energy back up and bring in some of the mids and highs. I'm going to solo this and dial it in. That's nice.
My heart beats with the stroke, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam.
So now by going to work on a different part of the track, we've sort of done a little bit of mixing, right? Before we had this super loop going on, a bunch of sounds. I had the pads like 7 dB too loud. And so now we're starting to understand where certain elements fit in the mix too, which is always nice. The next piece involves our vocal, and basically in Ableton, if you right-click it, you can go down to Convert Melody to New MIDI Track. And now Ableton is going to take its best guess at what the top melody of the vocal is. So here you can see it's going to spit out some MIDI, and this is the guess. So the first part is right, and the second part is pretty bad.
My heart beats with the stroke, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam.
So what I'm going to do now is just spend a good 10-15 minutes sort of figuring out what these actual notes are and getting them quantized, and spare you guys the pain of watching me do that. And then we're going to use this top melody for the first part of our track. So here's the cleaned up melody, guys. And it sounds really nice in isolation and with the vocal playing. So basically I've got just our pad channel here that the vocal is playing on. And I've gone up an octave from the chords to create a little bit of separation there. And so with the vocal, here's how it sounds.
Oh, my heart beats with the stroke, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam.
Pretty catchy. And so my idea now is we can use this melody here in the first part of the track to sort of tease that the vocal is going to be coming in. And so let's go work on a different part of the song now. So I'm going to paste the vocal melody over to here. Maybe we'll call this section, drop 1, parentheses, top melody. And then over here, vocal question mark. Maybe we'll wait to have the vocal come in. And so let's get our drums over here, our sub over here, etc. We've still got our old drop idea over here that we'll have to revisit. And I also made a discovery when I was doing some work off camera that we have a section of the drum stem that is better than the one we were using for our original drop idea. So we were working with this piece right here. And then there's also a piece over here, which is a little bit cleaner. It's a little bit louder, so I'm going to bring it down a couple dB. So I'll just make this kind of a gray color so we know the difference, but I'm going to use this stem for now. Perfect. For the chords here, it would be nice to save the following progression for the breakdown and the second drop. So I'm just going to use the root note and have it sort of die out at the end, similar to our sub. So there's a little bit of silence at the end of every, well, 2 bars rather. So I'm just going to delete everything. And we'll have sort of a pad that is connected to the sub still because they're both just playing the root note. And yes, we'll keep it filtered down. Let's have it die out even earlier. Back up to our vocal here, guys. I've added a channel that has our vocal chorus on it, and I've titled it Verby Vox Shot. So now we've got 30% reverb, long decay, and we just want to have some vocal hits that are sort of flying in and filling in some of the space at the end here when the sub and the pad sort of die out. So I'm just going to mute sort of the first 3/4 of each phrase and use some of these chops to, again, kind of tease our vocal. Circling back quickly to this UberDuck site, I wanted to generate a few more top loops and compare them to the quality of 11 Labs, which honestly were not that great, although that website in general seems pretty solid. And so I've asked it to make a percussive top loop with closed and open hats only, and this was the result. I'm also going to ask it to make a top loop with rides only and the catchiest top loop of all time. Unfortunately, it takes a long time to generate the sounds on this website compared to 11 Labs, so that's one of the downfalls. Here are the results, and I put the same exact prompts into 11 Labs as well. So we've got the rides only from UberDuck, the all-time catchiest top loop from UberDuck, the hats only from 11 Labs, the rides only from 11 Labs, which are not rides, but they're actually some super crispy hats. And the all-time catchiest from 11 Labs. Let's spit out this one as well. What I've done next is taken some of the pieces from those loops and just simplified a ton. So now we have just a very basic hat pattern. This closed hat layer here, I did add the same chain that's on our vocal. So with it off and with it on, kind of robotifies it a little bit, right? Sounds like something an AI would approve of. And then for the hats, the key is just your EQ. So if we listen in context with the track, with this EQ off, it's going to sound the same with it on. So why not cut out some noise below? With it off, with it on. Right? We only care about the crispy highs, so just cut out the low noise there. And then the rides, I'm thinking, can possibly serve as more of a background element. So lower volume, I put quite a bit of reverb on there. And so the progression would sound something like this. To cap off this first section of the track, guys, I've added a very basic DJ intro section with mainly just the drums playing. It's nice to have a section like this so when you go back and listen in your car or on a different system, you can listen to just the kick drum or the chord drums and decide if you like them. And then also just to have, an extended version for your records, right? So that you can mix it in easier when you're playing it out. But whether you release that version with the quote-unquote boring intro is up to you. A lot of times you can just get right into your main ideas or have a more captivating intro for the streaming version. But really here, all we have now is just a progression. So we've got the perk progression we were talking about. I also added an EDMProd hat so we can have the EDMProd mark on this Galactic AI track, which also feels like it needs to be the name. So I'm going to group everything and call this Galactic AI, baby. And by the way, if you haven't grabbed our starter kit, our EDM starter kit, definitely grab that so you can get some samples like this that are definitely better than the AI generated ones. And then really it's all about just slowly building the energy. So in progressive, you're not trying to do anything crazy. You're not trying to like impress anybody in the first part of the track. It's really just a very introductory section to sort of set up the main ideas. So just dialing in the filters, right? If we look on the pads and the chords, I've got it rising from 440 hertz up to 888 hertz. We've got these chops that come in. I have a little volume gain on those. And then I did also add the main vocal, but I'm having it start a little quiet and then kind of coming up in volume, getting ready for the breakdown, which is not something I usually do. Generally, when you introduce a lead vocal, you want it to sort of hit with a bang. But because this track is sort of, birthing an AI into existence, it kind of seems to fit the bill. And so basically, it's just everything we've already talked about. So we'll give this part a little listen, and then we'll go to the breakdown. So now we're transitioning into the breakdown, which I've already written. And basically, it's just a matter of using the parts you already have, right? So everything here to kind of transition into the breakdown is a natural sweep. So our perks, for example, I have the reverb rising, the mix amount on the dry wet, and the decay here. So if we solo this and hear the effect. Nice smooth little washout. And then I also have an impact here, which is just the kick drum with a bunch of reverb on it. And I stretched it out. So, if you grab a clip, you can kind of just hold shift and drag it. So I have this kind of wonky little impact sound here. And then we also have this little riser here from this Interstellar Ambience 4. Honestly, we need some more FX and kind of white noise risers and whooshes and stuff in here. But this is the closest thing we had to that. Sounds pretty smooth, sounds pretty spacey. And then this first part of the breakdown is basically just figuring out how can we transition from our drop here to the vocal and sub coming in. The main vocal is going to come in, the sub, right? You remember our initial idea with this sub progression here? And the pads. So pretty much I just have stuff fading in. So the subs here, I've got a high pass on them for this first section, and so it kind of just fades into existence. The only other thing to note in the breakdown is just careful attention, again, given to filters and volume automation. Super important in progressive, but right here, the melody kind of just jumps up a few dB right before the drop to kind of create a little bit of a special moment. And other than that, the second drop is literally the same as our original idea. So over here, we had this drop idea. Remember, we had this little glitch marker. Same exact thing. The only difference is we're going to have some perks coming in after that. But really, this track is kind of at a point where it's like 80% done. We could sit here all day, add some more FX and drones and risers and hits, but really that's at the point where you just let it sit, come back next week. And, electronic music is modular. So right now I have a very short breakdown and it kind of just goes into the drop. There's no build section, but I could add a build section when I come back to it. But, it's at the point where we can kind of just be happy with it for now. And so let's listen through from the end of the first drop through the end. And then we're going to go and we're going to create a music video with AI. And we're also going to try an AI mastering service. And then we'll listen back through one last time while watching the music video. So that should be fun.
My heart beats with this drum, turning it through every glow. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam. My heart beats with the strobe, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam. Oh, my heart beats with the strobe, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam. Oh, my heart beats with the strobe, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam. Oh, my heart beats with the strobe, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam. Oh, my heart beats with the strobe, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam. Oh, my heart beats with the strobe, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam.
As far as the music video, this is the prompt I'm going to put in there. Create a music video for a progressive EDM track about an AI whose heart beats with a strobe. The AI has been lost in space for eternity and roams around from galaxy to galaxy. And these are the lyrics, by the way. I probably should have mentioned this a couple other times, but when we generated the track with Suno, these are the lyrics it spit out. It definitely is not pronouncing all of them correctly. It says, universe or something, but it's kind of cool. Again, if this is an AI, it doesn't have to talk in perfect human English. So I think this is good. And we'll do one last listen and watch through. So here is our Galactic AI track with an AI generated video from Neural Frames. It turns out that Adobe Firefly only spits out like a 5-second video. So now we have a 25 second loop or so. With the free version, it gives you kind of a lower quality video, but it's still pretty cool. And as far as the mastering goes, it turns out that Lander also costs money. So I just went with what we have in Ableton for now. And thanks for watching. If you want us to do a part 2, let us know in the comments. And thanks for sticking with us for the whole video here. So I will leave us with Galactic AI. My heart beats with the strobe, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam. Oh, my heart beats with the strobe, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam. Oh, my heart beats with the strobe, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam. Oh, my heart beats with the strobe, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam. Oh, my heart beats with the strobe, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam. Oh, my heart beats with the strobe, journeying through every globe. Lost in space feels like my home. In this true universe I roam.
Oh.